Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to introduce you to Suzanne, who's had the most fascinating career. And actually, what I want to discuss with her is a number of different points. First piece being, she puts away the phone. First piece being about how to reinvent yourself, because actually she's done that now 3 times, I'd suggest. So she was a regional director when we first met in the pub industry with Spirit, I think it was, or was it Punch? Spirit?
Yeah.
Punch, yeah. And then was actually one of the driving forces of People First and Hospitality Guild, as it was at the time. And then has now worked in advertising and actually does a lot of work in engagement and communications, which is particularly, I think, relevant to this market, what I want to talk about. Because how is it best to get messaging right? Because I think particularly relevant at the moment with government, not a dig at the government, but I think everyone's a bit confused about what's what. And how do you actually get a good message out? And actually, how do we actually make sure people understand what's going on? Because I've had about 6 conversations today and everyone's got different definitions. So unless you may be better than I am, but I'm lost. So how do we engage? Which is what we want to discuss today. Are you comfortable with that, Suzanne?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So shall we start with your career?
Yeah.
Obviously you started, let's give you some background on you, because we started in pubs.
Yeah.
You built a career over a number of years. And when you became a kind of regional director when we first met, do you want to explain how big an area that was?
Yeah, so I'd just like to say, when I say I've reinvented myself 3 times, I'm not 98. I can't lie. So it's every few years. Yeah, so I mean, the great thing about hospitality, as everybody knows already, is that the ability to climb the ladder is really ripe, and people don't necessarily understand that when they come into the business. So I actually started running pubs and then got poached by a client to become an area manager, and I think just by demonstrating what I could do and capacity, ended up as regional director, which was running 500 pubs across well, there was 8 of us covering eight regional directors covering the UK. And we went through quite a lot of different restructures. At that time, pub companies were very much leveraged on debt. And I don't think anybody expected the economic crisis that we had sort of 10 years ago now. So we had to sort of manoeuvre ourselves out of that, as well as going through lots and lots of legislative changes. And it was such a diverse role that at the time I didn't really realise it. I thought it was a bit of a sales role, it was managing a team of people, but actually there was a lot of compliance, there was communication, there was marketing, there was planning, there was strategic. So it ended up developing a lot of skills that I probably didn't deliberately intend to develop, but that I did almost by accident, but also by having a really keen interest in learning and just absorbing information, which is what I enjoy doing. I have to be doing lots of different things at the same time. I can't stay on the same subject, which also means I'm not a complete finisher, by the way, but there you go, downsides of that. And then as Punch sort of went through some changes, I was elected to run the operations team from the centre. So central operations director then meant making sure that we were really the bridge between the operations team, of which there were 140, and the centre. And it was a bit like playing Kofi and Anne, because they both hated each other with a passion. So trying to get the central office to not have their back towards operations was the key thing. And I did that for a number of years, which then ended up being a larger role that included recruiting lessees or franchisees, so not individual employees, doing the strategic stuff, and then obviously all the operational implementation. And then Punch grew so big that they decided to get a divorce from their managed division. And I, again, I keep saying right place, right time, that's what it felt like, but ended up setting up a 500 strong pub group because there were complications with the banking, and we had to move pubs from tenanted back to managed, and they couldn't cope. So we set up a new pub company within 12 weeks, and that was my parting gesture as I took redundancy. And the reason that I did that was that I felt I didn't have anywhere else to go, and actually Punch was going to become a poor relation of the managed company that had spun off. So I went off into the big wide world and ended up, for my sins, with People First. I was there doing a consultative role to set up a membership organisation, and then they asked me to run the Hospitality Guild, which I did for 2 years. which was incredibly different. And I thought I would absolutely love it, because the bit I really enjoyed a punch towards the end of my tenure there was going out, engaging, getting on with people, you know, really changing perceptions of what other people thought of punch. In those days, there weren't very many senior females, so it helped to be prominent, and dealing with a lot of newspaper outlets and other sort of key stakeholders in the industry, and that lent itself to being able to replicate that ability to engage with the different companies who needed to get behind an organisation like the Guild. The downside of that, of course, was that we were trying to also rally about 100 different professional, inverted commas, bodies and trade bodies to unify behind the industry, and that was the difficult challenge that I don't think anybody in my lifetime will ever succeed in doing. So I left there after 2 years and did various consultancies, worked in communication, and I now work for a marketing company, a creative company, where I've been for a couple of years. And that is so different again. I mean, my role is the account director role, so it is strategic, it's building business, but tapping into the different disciplines and knowledge that we've got under the roof, you know, the sort of agency that I'm in of 120. It's very good around insights and digital and all the different strengths and abilities and ways that you can communicate in marketing. So it's literally fascinating. And yeah, that's the sort of précis.
Thank you. That's a great start. Let's get on to the communication, because I think this is a really crucial piece, isn't it? Because communications are changing at such a speed, isn't it? I mean, from your point of view, firstly, how have you picked up? Because you've learnt that at speed as well, haven't you? You've been there a couple of years, 3 years?
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So, I mean, communications changed. Oh, gosh, obviously COVID's happened, and I think the world was moving towards digital anyway. That's now massively accelerated. And I think the way that we now speak to people and how we communicate is so different. You don't have that opportunity to, you know, we're producing films now, and if it's over 30 seconds, it's too long. Anything that's going on social media that's above 2 minutes, and it's attention span's gone. And that's what you're competing against. But getting clients, sometimes with a lot of different organizations have got a lot of interested stakeholders, and you start off with somebody perhaps in marketing or comms or operations. You absolutely anchor down your messaging and what it is that you want to say, and then the communication, that sort of contribution comes from everyone else, and before you know it, you've got cabinet responsibility on what should be a simple film that's then being produced and competing with the length of Ben-Hur, and that's what we've got to try and manage.
So what are the key things to think about when we think about communication, do you think? Or what are the key mistakes people make?
Well, frankly, they use too many words. Clearly a problem I have, but they don't, I think the experience that I've got is they don't just think about what the customer wants to hear. We did a piece of research, very simple research, around what advertising was working for different organisations during COVID. And, you know, it seems a long time ago now, but if you cast your mind back, you were getting the likes of Heinz, who were doing, we're doing lots of things for school dinners. It was all very benevolent, charitable stuff. And at the beginning of lockdown on the 20th of March, it was fantastic. You remember going out and we all clapped for the NHS, and everyone was like, oh my God, we're going to know our neighbours forever. And of course, now those people who've stopped clapping for the NHS have forgotten the neighbour's name. So a lot of, you know, at the beginning of that sort of COVID, lots of companies wanted to do the trust, the society, the community bit. But what people really wanted to hear is, what are you as an organisation doing? And at that time, it was, what are you doing to keep me safe? And how are you sticking to your values? And what they wanted to do was get involved in things that were out of their remit. So the first thing I would say is, whatever it is you want to say, work it out and then stick to it. And don't try and play the role of being the ambassador for something, when actually what your customers want to hear is what you're doing. What is it that you are doing?
I mean, it's interesting what you're saying. Do you think that community spirit piece has gone? Because actually a lot of people think it's still remaining, and actually one of the barriers to people going back to work.
I knew that you was going to ask me as soon as I said that, and it wasn't a prepared answer. No, I don't think that it's gone. And I absolutely think it's something that if we're clever and smart enough, as certainly as a hospitality industry, which has always been geared around people, if we are smart enough to keep it alive, it will stay alive. But the risk is that with all of the competing demands and things, I don't think there's a problem in being community driven. I'm not saying don't be community driven and don't leverage that, but what I am saying is don't try and be just that and forget what your business is. So it's okay if you're developing a product and actually there is a benefit for society, that's okay, because it's still about the product. But don't, as if you're trying to sell shoes, tell us that on the way to work this morning you dropped something off at the food bank. You know, tell us about the fact that in your shop selling shoes, which isn't the greatest example obviously, but if you're in your shop selling, how you are keeping people safe, how your team spirit in your business has developed, and keep it about your business.
And how about the whole point about the old-fashioned thing about relationships?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily talking about your customers, but talking about relationships across peer groups, within your own business, with your clients. Certainly for me during lockdown, I mean, we're an agency, so we sell our time, and that's the most difficult thing for people to buy, obviously. If any of you tried to sell your time, I'm really worth it. People find that quite challenging to part money with. But for sure, for me, staying in contact with people and literally picking the phone up, even though at some points I felt like I was stalking people, actually I found that people really wanted that relationship. And interestingly, I had a client on the call this morning. She's been away for a couple of weeks and I've not worked with her direct. And, you know, my usual, hi, which is just my style of answering the phone. And she's like, oh, it's so nice to hear your voice again. And that relationship was built. There wasn't a strategic aim when I set off, you know, all through those months, but just because we'd built that relationship and we'd, you know, chatted business, that we'd, how are you, and all that sort of thing. It's just meant that our relationship going forward is more solid. And if she's got a choice of agency to work with, she'll absolutely come to us, even nothing else, that we're good to work with. And that's her experience.
It's really interesting. How do you think about the events piece and how that's going to come back? We had a reason why I asked this. We did a webinar this morning for the hotel sector. And it was interesting. Someone said the international travel, which is always seen as one of the biggest problem areas, will come back. Because once people start traveling to see customers again, everyone's going to start following. So
well, it's definitely true that people follow people. That is a fact. You know, it depends on legislative restrictions, but if we assume that all the legislation has been lifted, I think that people are starting now to get to the point of the drama is over, the peak of it's over. There's so much press out there about, oh, your chance of getting COVID of 1 in 2 million, and people are starting to feel that they need to live again because actually they've spent 6 months doing nothing, and I think people are prepared to take that risk. I think we also need to do more insights. I obviously love a good stat. Only I say this again today because we've been doing some insights with some customers for my main client this week, and I've seen the videos that have come out of that in advance of their AGM, which by the way they're doing virtually. But it was interesting to see all the customers being interviewed in there, and they very much talk about the future and things returning to normal. And that's a piece of qualitative scientific research that is for a particular informal eating out client, without giving their name away. But yeah, they're very much thinking that things are going to return to some form of normality. Having said that, they're planning for it not being as well. From events side, I mean, we run events here as well, and we are very much going down a virtual route. We are finding that more clients are doing things virtually. However, I think that novelty is going to wear off as well. I think what will happen is that people, instead of doing massive, great big events and getting people from all over the country for a few hours or whatever, there'll be definitely more online opportunities, which is better for sustainability. It's better for access, but I think it will segregate. I think the meetup events will become stronger because there'll be fewer of them. I mean, you and I, Chris, when I was working at the Guild, Jesus Christ, I didn't even have time to dry clean the 97 black dresses that I had before I had to turn them around and do another event. It was just ridiculous, you know. So I think that when we do return to events, they will be bigger and stronger than ever. But I also think we'll work a lot smarter in terms of you using a virtual environment in which to hold sessions like this.
And the hard piece here is about trust, isn't it? Because one of the big things that needs to happen is that rebuilding trust.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of our clients are sort of working along they mention trust all the time and reassurance. And I mean, I don't know from what angle you're specifically meaning it with, Ruth, from a customer or a company point of view.
Well, I think it's both, isn't it? I mean, one of the big discussions pre-COVID was about the lack of trust in leadership generally.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And actually, my question, I suppose, is some of the concern, because there's this, I mean, if you go into the City of London, it is still dead.
Yeah.
It is still like every time I'm there, I keep expecting to see the cast of Walking Dead walk around the corner. And actually, I think part of that is because people just don't want to go back to the office experience as it was.
Do you know what? I've just come out of a board meeting where we've been having this exact same conversation, because in 4 weeks' time, the 25% of our business still furloughed will be returning. And there's a real anti about coming back to work. And there's two trains of thought, really. One is that from a leadership perspective, we need to be reassuring people, A, that we've taken all the measures we possibly can, but that we are a collaborative agency. We absolutely anchor our effectiveness on the ideas that we come up with that you can't do in isolation. And we're trying to be sympathetic with people, but you have to, you know, I mean, I come into the office, unfortunately I don't live very far away. I choose to come into the office because that is a sign of leadership to the people who are slightly more reluctant to come back. And I've got my own challenges in terms of family who are isolating. So it's not as if I'm just, you know, a 21-year-old woman, you know, perfectly safe out there. Who's laughing? Nobody. Good. So
What makes me laugh, I get called on the danger group almost nowadays. So what are you all about?
But I do think, you know, the conversation that I was just having about encouraging people to come back, and the company I work for is historically a family business, and they were reflecting on times when we had print presses, and the managing director was working on the press at the time that there were strikes, the printing strikes, to working through the night to get, and people who've worked here a long time remember that. They absolutely remember, oh God, you know, Mr. Linney was working on the printing press at 2 a.m. to get the newspapers out. It's absolutely, you know, that's lasted for 40 years in this business. So for sure, I think the way that we lead our workforces feel reassured and can come back to work. And also, you know, that we're making an effort to try and get business back to some form of normality. We've got to be talking about it, and we've got to be realistic about what the challenges are of that, but, you know, what people need to do to support it.
No, it's really interesting, isn't it? And how about the role of social media as well? It ties in as well, doesn't it? Because everyone blames social media for so many of the work. It's not really that, is it? I don't think.
Well, social media, well, most companies are boycotting social media at the moment. I mean, it depends whether you think of social media as an advertising platform or you think about it as social media. I find social media the most depressing thing ever. If one more person tells me about their weight loss or their 21-day shed or their alcohol-free weekend, do you know what I mean? I don't find social media personally, for me, the inspiring platform that it was intended to be, where you meet up and stay in contact with people in the way that you used to, or the way that you couldn't because you weren't in proximity of them. Like, you've got a friend in Australia and you're keeping in touch. It was fantastic when it all started, but it's just become quite toxic. From an advertising perspective, if you know, speaking digitally, it's an amazingly effective platform. However, there are a number of companies boycotting it at the moment, for the reasons of doing things right because of where money's going, and actually that's forcing companies to find alternative ways of digitally advertising as well, which I think is a good thing.
Let's go back onto you, if that's okay. Sorry, I'll put you through the ringer a bit. Because actually, a lot of creating the changes you've gone through it is a huge amount of different learning, different disciplines, which is actually is quite a test of anybody, isn't it? Not very few people have been able to do what you've done. What did you learn through this process?
Through my 20-year career, or
more the last decade, actually, in some ways. I mean, to go from one traditional being an operator to go into, I'm sure Sam's got views about working for one of the bodies as well. I'm sure he'll come on later to talk, but that's a different challenge because you've got to be politically astute all the time, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've got people coming all the time. To then gain to engagement and comms, there are such different skill sets. Has the ops held you in good stead, or has it been about you adapting?
You know, I don't feel, I was really thinking about this today. I don't feel like there's a certain moment in time where I have sat down and gone, right, today, Matthew, I am going to be. I feel like it's just been a natural evolution where I've seen something and I've gone for it and I've adapted my skills. I think what I have learned about going through that process is really staying true to your values and who you are. It is very, very easy when you jump from one thing to another to try and be something. You know, I remember when my MD at Punch used a phrase and he said to me, do you know, a lot of people think you're really idiosyncratic. Now, once I'd looked it up in the dictionary and realised he wasn't calling me an idiot, at the time, I don't think he meant it as a compliment. But I sat back and I thought, do you know what? I'm so chuffed with that. I'm dead happy because what I interpret from that is I'm different and I'm who I am. And you don't necessarily know what you got. And I can remember somebody saying to me, you know, when I was going through my career, I was very privileged to have a lot of really good business coaches who've stimulated a lot of my thinking. And I've always been asked, what leaders do you respect, do you follow? You never want to be somebody. You should never want to be somebody. But it is absolutely fair game to look at different leadership styles and think, I really respect what they do with that. And that's sort of what I took out of being this very different person. I think for the last decade, leadership has been so blasé. It's been come see, come sorry. It's very, oh, well, you tick all these boxes. You've done your psychometric testing and you're not psychotic or schizophrenic. So, you know, and therefore you're okay. You're PC. But that's not going to change things. That's not going to be who people look up to and want to be. If you're disliked for something in a leadership role, like being too loud or being too blunt or whatever, it's a style and that's okay. So the first thing I would say, be really true to your values. And I also had somebody, a business coach, who helped me understand what those values are. And it's not actually something you can sit down and go, because it's generally it's that thing that lights your fuse that either makes you really angry or really passionate or really, and generally it's below the glacier that's below the surface, and you don't know you can't work it out for yourself. And the minute that somebody said to me, yours is integrity, which took 2 sessions to work out, and I thought, do you know what, that's it. And that stayed with me. So sticking to your values, I know what my values are, work out what your values are, and don't ever compromise on it. Because actually, you know, I've made mistakes in my career, you know, whether it be people decisions, employing people or getting rid of people, or a bad commercial decision. Of course, I've made mistakes, everybody has. But I can honestly say I can sleep at night because that's what really matters to me. It's about doing what I believe is the right thing and nothing else. So that's sort of my big lesson, I think. And then the other thing is that you really are only as good as your next project. So don't rely on people looking at your CV and saying you're brilliant, going into a job and then expecting to have everybody bowing at you for 2 years. Oh God, I remember when you built Hospitality House or something, because it just doesn't happen. You've got to be as hungry for the next thing and just keep going.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's go to the leadership, because the leadership piece is quite crucial at the moment, isn't it? Because again, that's one of the things people want to see, is leaders coming back and really engaging, because actually that disengagement piece has been one of the core problems pre-COVID, hasn't it? Yeah. And it is getting values back into business is one of the, but that was also about engagement, isn't it?
In terms of
well, how leaders engage their teams is going to have to go almost back a bit old-fashioned, and maybe I'm just old-fashioned, which I accept. But I mean, that has been one of the worries. It's just people haven't been. People say the millennial generation is very quiet, but I'm not sure. I mean, they have been very quiet and been very respectful, but actually they're also quite fed up.
Yeah, I think it's a generation of it. Either to me is very trade unionist. So there's the rebellious side, and there's the work to rule. There's working time directive and wages and all of this, or it tends to be very obedient. And actually, neither one of those two things is conducive to having a strong workforce. I find that leaders in businesses these days, and you know, not being detrimental to where I work, but again, reverting to the conversation I had not half an hour ago, and these views that some of these leaders have sometimes are actually fine, but they don't communicate them at all. It's like, but what you're not understanding is that if people are at home worried and wanting to know what you're doing to bring this business back and get them their job security when they come off furlough in 4 weeks, then you're going to have to communicate to them. And I don't mean having an update via an email on Friday. Actually, you need to have something that's interactive. You need to be accessible. You need to show that you can be asked really difficult questions and have the humility to accept if you don't actually know the answer, but give your very best answer and prove that you're not heading towards retirement or you're not looking for your exit plan, that you are, you know, you're there. You are there and you are visible and you are willing to take whatever question your people want to ask of you.
Fair enough. Oh, the other thing about you, which I know I've seen firsthand, is how resilient you are. You've taken some knocks over the time, haven't you, to be fair? I think it's fair to say.
Like a little duck under the water. Big smile.
I mean, how and you've bounced back. I mean, how hard has that process been? Or have you been mentally just tough?
It has been tough. I think I had to learn a long time ago not to take things personally. And when your values are geared, my personal values, and this is not the same for everybody, when it's geared around integrity and you feel that something has not been done with integrity, it's even harder because you take it personally. I think, how easy of a... I think it's worse when you get stuck in your own thoughts. So when you're on your own and you're trying to work things out, but actually when you get in front of people, you know, I don't overthink it. I don't, you know, I haven't really planned for this conversation. I know we had a vague idea.
I'm shocked to the core.
You are?
Shocked to the core.
But I just think, actually, you know, I waver between things that, you know, one of my favourite saying is, we're just ants on a plant, which makes it sound like I don't care. But at the end of the day, that's all we are. We're just little dots on the earth, aren't we? And, it, you know, very philosophically, you've just got to be who you are. And you've just got to look out for yourself. And really, it doesn't matter what can possibly go wrong. If I'm going to pursue this opportunity, what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Nobody's going to say that was a really awful job that you did, and you're going to give it your all. So I think I've just learned not to dwell in my own thoughts, and also having people around you that when you are having those knocks of confidence, surround yourself. It's okay to have somebody to go to that you know he's going to give you a real push up, a real boost. It's like if you've got more than one sibling, you'll have one that you go to for the tough love, and then you'll have the other one when you need a cuddle and you want to cry, and you choose. And it's okay to manage people in your circle or your bubble by relationship, and go to who you know is going to give you what you want to hear at that moment in time and what you need. But you just got to keep positive.
Okay. And so which leaders have you looked up to particularly being good, being influential on you?
Influential on me? So I have got one person who, not for their leadership, well, actually a little bit for their leadership, but certainly for their ability to speak. And this has got absolutely nothing to do with my political opinions. So please don't make your screen go black. But I think Nigel Farage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, honest to God, I just think he is an amazing, when you talk about resilience and ability to handle things, and I know he's done some humdingers in the last year, but if ever you watch the stuff when he was in the European Parliament and how he's kept his resilience and he stuck true to his thoughts and his beliefs and his values, and whenever you talk to him, he convinces you, you then go and get a sense of reality and you might think differently. But in terms of actually somebody that I can watch, yeah, actually, he's up there for me.
So how do you feel about politicians generally?
Well, they're politicians, and I think politicians generally should be put on an island, given COVID. But you know, no, there are some really good politicians, and no, there are genuinely some good politicians. I've met a lot of MPs over a lot of years, and there are some really good ones. But there are equally some who, and sorry, just to say that the good ones, I wouldn't ever fill their shoes, because the abuse that they get for doing what they think is right does absolutely not compensate for the salary that they get. So that's the good guys. Then on the other side, you've got politicians who are in it for themselves, and they are by definition politicians. And I really struggle with some of those individual people.
Okay, let's go on to the industry. How do you view the industry and the challenge we have now? Is it a moment of opportunity, or is it a moment of?
Well, of course it's. Look, what I don't think the industry should do is sit back and go, woe is me, and expect a government bailout. And you know, the government, in all fairness, have been very good to the industry. Let's not put too, mix our words. I think that they've done as much as they could possibly be expected to do. We're in a pandemic, and it's up to us to get out, and the strongest will survive. And the industry will reform, but it will reform as the best people in the industry make it reform. And if the industry were to be able to come together and agree what that looks like, at the moment, it feels as though there's lots of small lever pulling, and there's a lot of this going on, do that. There needs to be more of a game plan, and people follow people. And again, it's the legislative stuff that's the biggest hindrance, I think. But once we get through that, and we will get through it, we absolutely will get through it, I think industry needs to be in a position to absolutely fly. And I hope that a lot of leaders are really sitting down and contemplating, right, let's just forget tomorrow and let's look over there. And how are we going to get there? And what does it look like? And what do I want to be at that point? And really sort of defining what they are or their company is.
Okay. Now, we have a lot of people here on this who are very passionate about young talent, which I know is one of your passions as well. So maybe move on to that. Because actually for young talent, this is probably an incredibly challenging time, isn't it?
Yeah, I can imagine it's quite isolating actually as well. I don't know what some of the emerging leaders sort of groups are like. Obviously I'm a bit older, just a bit, and I've got lots of contacts and people to talk to and spin off, and I've been through it. We thought in the pub industry when the smoking ban happened, the world was doomed. Obviously it wasn't. It bounced back, and actually food and gastro took off. So we will bounce back from this. We absolutely will.
But how do we know? How do we reassure younger people? Because younger people are taking a hit, aren't they? Particularly, where I feel sorry, particularly in cities, is if you're in a one-bedroom flat and you're hearing and you've got to go into the office, or you've got to work from home. It must be remarkably difficult, isn't it?
I can imagine it is. If you are isolated and you are literally working in a small environment. I mean, my house is quite busy, but we have been really locked down because we've had to isolate. And not that I've become a basket case, but it has affected. You wake up one morning and think, oh my God, how do I actually put mascara on? You actually forget to look good, and you need to keep up. You need to be in control of that. You need to keep your network of people. You need to get out and meet people in a safe environment whenever you can. You need to get yourself into a routine and a discipline of doing things that are positive. And I'm not talking mental health, I'm not Denise Welch, but these things are actually quite important. I think you need to do that for yourself. And also, you know, plan whatever your individual work and career challenges, start to have a plan and work to it, and just do one thing a day that is positive towards that, whether it be an online training or speaking to somebody, or, you know, whatever it is, just do something positive every day, because you'll be streets ahead of the ones that haven't.
Perfect. So Annie and Sam, can I bring you this point? Because obviously you've both been working with young people in different ways. Your thoughts on the challenges we face at this time?
If I can just say, I think we need, as you said, Suzanne, we need to stay extremely positive with the young people. We, in our company, have a section that does internships in the USA. In the USA, some of the top hotels are just crying out for catering internships. They desperately need students, even though the political situation isn't allowing the movement. But all of our schools in Switzerland are fully open. They have been since July. So it's great for me to be positive with young people at the moment and look at the future and say, yes, you can go. I've got a young girl, a Pakistani girl, who qualified and did her master's in pharmacology. She's always only ever wanted to be a chef, and it's been great for me to guide her into the path. She's just managed to get her visa from the Pakistan embassy, and she's due to join Switzerland in October. But like you, Suzanne, I started in the pub industry. I saw the changes when the smoking ban came in, and I've actually just been writing a bio for somebody on myself. So I've gone through my employment path, and it's all just brought me where I am now. And I'm very fortunate to be working with young people and in education and in hospitality. So I'm really upbeat and positive about it.
That's good, Sam. You've obviously...
Yeah, I think, you know, we're at a risk here of potentially losing a whole generation of workforce, because I think the messages that are coming out at the moment is that there are no jobs, that there are no opportunities. And if you're a young person, you've just finished university, just coming out of college, you're just finishing school, you know, where do you go? What do you look for in terms of your next steps and natural employment opportunities? And, you know, our industry are, in a matter of months, have gone from a skill shortage to an overpopulated workforce. So the jobs that are available, they're highly skilled people that are already applying for them. So, you know, we've seen apprenticeship numbers at level 2, the entry level roles, almost disappear overnight. So I think we are at a danger of the messages going out to young people saying, industry is closed, you know, there's no jobs here, Gov, move on. And we all know that in time, those jobs will come back, and we'd have lost that generation of people that are now would traditionally be entering our industry, either be part-time work or on an apprenticeship or some sort of employment. And we need to try and say to them, we are still open, we are still engaged. The government Kickstart program is a real great opportunity for employers to, I hate this phrase, but try before you buy. You know, you've got an opportunity to take on somebody on a structured program, have their salaries paid more or less, and you give somebody that work experience in that job potentially in the future, you know, when the economy does come back online. But we've got to be careful that we don't lose a whole generation of potential recruits, and not just young people, but, you know, career changes from across the spectrum. So we need to keep positive, and all that work that we were doing pre-COVID about our industry is great, it's a great place to work, you know, it's a career for life, and you can start working in a pub like Suzanne's done and end up, you know, at the top of the tree. You know, we still need to give those aspirations and inspire those young people that our industry can still offer that, and that we're not closed, and, you know, we might be hitting a bumpy road.
Yeah, and if I can, sorry, Chris, if I can just say on that subject as well, I mean, I'm a great advocate of young people being allowed to work at a young age and to gain that experience, washing up, actually collecting glasses. The sad thing is we've put legislation in that stops young people doing that. So I think we've got to change this whole mental attitude towards the fact that you can say, Suzanne, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that any young person, and I look in a lecture hall and I'll ask youngsters if they've worked in a pub, and they sort of go, I said, well, put your hand up high, you should be very proud. Oh, why? I said, because in a pub, you take on every single process of any business, from customer care, quality standard, cash handling, every process. And that's the best apprenticeship for any young person, if they can get the opportunity to start working at a young age. And in that itself gives them the confidence to go forward and to be able to be a good rounded professional, because they can always look back at the incidents where they had to deal with a difficult customer, and they build that confidence. So I do agree, Sam, we do need to get these people realizing. I mean, Rick Stein, for example, has got 39 openings at the moment. You know, we need to let people know that the good businesses are coming through. Okay, we'll lose business, but they might be the weaker businesses. So if we can support the good businesses and let these people realize there's work out there, then I think it's got to be the way forward.
I agree. I think that we need to be a bit more predictive. So when we came out of the last economic crisis, consumer behaviour changed in that people expected quality at a better value price because they were used to having, you know, things thrown at them for a lower price. So people stopped accepting, you know, that's then where all your craft beers and your gastro came from. And I think we need to start thinking, what is it that consumers are going to be happy with in the hospitality industry? And actually, if you wanted to turn that into a positive, it's more likely that people will want to eat out as opposed to go and do some vertical drinking in a pub. So there are some opportunities. A couple of things that Sam said. So he said, you know, the message that's going out is business is closed. Well, why are we not positioning, you know, as long as we've got the trade bodies quite rightly fighting for financial support for industry, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. But that message and the force of which that's been delivered, which is, if you do not help, we are doomed, that is also being heard by the young people. So on the one hand, you've got to keep that message to government so that industry is supported financially. But on the other, industry's got to be responsible for saying to young people, actually, well, we're saying that, but what we're really doing is preparing to open. We're doing insights, we're doing consumer research, we're trying to anticipate what future trends are going to look like, and we are adapting our business. You know, when I was in the guild as well, sorry, last little rant, but when I was in the guild, it was very much, you know, people were fed up of us saying, oh, you know, let's get, you know, people who've never worked before, who can't read and write, and third generation unemployed, because hospitality offers such opportunity. There's still obviously a place for that, and that's something as an industry we should be really proud of. But actually what I'm hearing now is that it is going to be a competitive world for young people to actually go and get some really good jobs in these new businesses that are going to be really focused for the future, and that's going to potentially up the bar. If we're really if we take that as an opportunity, that is going to raise the bar. Instead of mediocre, people are going to be, you know, proud to be a chef rather than being called chicken ping people. You know, it's going to be something that comes with a badge of honor because you managed to get that role, as opposed to it was the only job available because I was a student. And if we learn to position it in that way, then it does offer some opportunity. And I'm not saying it's simple. I'm not saying, for goodness sake, everybody do an advert and make that happen. It's far more difficult than it sounds. But if we can unify behind that positive messaging and that twist, we've got a fighting chance of keeping this generation that you, Sam, are quite nervous about losing.
I mean, the sector's always has a bit of a problem in itself in projecting its own message, isn't it? It's always been one of the battlegrounds for everybody.
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk about one voice. It doesn't happen. But if, you know, all of the different companies have got the same objective. They want to survive, they want to be future-proof, and they want to have the best people doing it. And if we can get groups of leaders together like this, and actually reinforce that positiveness, instead of people being isolated and thinking about tomorrow instead of next year, then as we can rally together with our own peer group and inadvertently make that happen by just being consistent.
Gary, can I bring you newest point? You're quite passionate about this whole topic as well, aren't you?
Yeah, there's lots of things to talk about here, but one thing is just going through my mind about the change in hospitality. It's becoming the norm. It's a good norm that when you go into bars now, that you're not standing upright at a bar. And there's 2 points in here. I mean, I think I've said before that there's a bar operator that I know very well. He's telling me that because people are not standing at bars, that's costing him 30% of turnover, because people are not having the shot at the bar or the quick Bacardi and Coke, whatever, whilst they're waiting for a drink. However, it is very nice when you sat now at a table. There's no pressure, there's no hassle, nobody's running around. There's no pressure at the bar, and people are coming over, and the staff are coming over to serve you. Now, that's very continental, and all of a sudden we've got it in the UK. And I really hope it continues. Now, I was in a bar the other night and I said to the manager, is this new style of operation affecting your P&L? Because I've heard the story that it's 30% off your bar turnover. And she was saying, it's a very well-known national brand. And she was saying that our profit and loss account came in last week for last month, as in August, okay, eat out and everything else. But they were 25% up year on year on profit. Now, that everything that we talked about the young people, and Chris, I think, again, I've shared before, when I chaired the Hotels Association in Aberdeen, 50 hotels, we did a session with young people, round about the age of 13 up to 16, invited them in from schools and academies with the parents, and there was about 80 and 90 staff from various hotels, not dressed in uniform, and the students had to go around and guess what we did in the hotel environment. That was a fantastic point, because what we're trying to say to the kids is, just because you hear of all the negative of long hours, pressure, bullying, all that sort of bad stuff that we know isn't always true, there's a lot of good stuff that goes on in our industry, affected. And if as a parent, if you want Johnny to be an accountant or a social media whiz or whatever, guess what? There could be a damn good accountant working for Hilton or Marriott, traveling the world and get a very good salary, or a lawyer or whatever else in our industry. And we're trying to get the parents to start advocating our sector as a career of choice, as opposed to what happens, of course, many people fall into our industry whilst they're at college or university. And lastly, I think, and I hope these forums continue, because I've said it for a long time, Chris, this collaboration is fantastic. And I think the more we can spread this word back out, the better. Because the younger people need to hear it. I often say to people on the Aberdeen stuff, when people say to me, it's hard work being in catering, it's long hours, it's aggressive, and I said, hang on, you're living in Aberdeen, where most people will go offshore and work on an oil rig. Do you really believe that's a really nice place and hospitable, and there's no testosterone going around and really, really heavy stuff going on, but we just don't hear about it? And why don't we hear about it? And yet we talk about it, or we hear about it a lot in our industry. And we do need to change the rhetoric. We need to get that message out there. It's a great place to be.
Suzanne?
We definitely need to change the rhetoric. And I think I spent 2 years at the Guild thinking about how on earth you can get the message into schools and to parents. I don't know how we create that change, if I'm honest. I feel that we need to almost take a slightly higher ground, and we're chipping at individual examples and people trying to make a difference, and it worries me that we'll be having the same conversation in a few years, whereas I don't have the how but this is a landmark moment in every industry, actually. And surely we can find a way of turning it into an opportunity. I love what you said about being in Aberdeen, and and not been on an oil rig, even though I've watched Shetland Island Medics, which I quite like, but anyway, they have lots of people off the rigs there. But I do think that we need to be slightly more refined, sort of shoulders back. This is, I don't know what you're talking about. What are you saying, that this industry isn't a great industry to work in? That's something that I don't understand. Whereas what we do is we try and defend it. Do you know what I mean? And we need to.
But isn't a problem the fact that hospitality people are naturally like to serve, because actually it gives them, is actually making other people happy is the natural piece of hospitality. You like to actually create experiences, so therefore you don't boast about what you are. That's almost what we have to do. It's that psychology piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're not comfortable with actually being brazen about ourselves. You look at me like I'm mad at this point.
No,
which is probably normal, I accept, but
that's my facial Tourette's. No, I think we need to be, you know, it comes back to that leadership and individual companies and organisations behaving in a way that their own staff then follow, where we do talk positively about, you know, I think a lot of it has to be subliminal. So there's a lot of responsibility on different company and business owners to do what everybody here is doing, but for it to be more consistent, and actually for us not to tolerate anything that doesn't fall into line with that way of behaving, because we're really proud of everything. And we do need to let some young leaders come through and take the helm, and they've got the answers. You know, I've always said people on the front line have got the answers, you know.
That's the hidden piece as well, which may or may not change. It's about leadership and the age of leadership. There's a stat that came out recently that the age of a chief exec went up 14 years between 2005 and 2019. It doesn't take brain box to Britain to realise it's exactly in line with the 2005's 14 years.
Yeah.
So the age of the chief exec in 2005 was the same, with the date of birth was the same as in 2019.
Well, it's like two kinds of leaders, isn't it? I don't know if it was you who once said it to me, but there's two kinds of leaders. There's those who pretend they want to help you up the ladder, and then when you get to the top, they just kick you back down because they don't want to lose their seat and they're keeping it warm. And then there's the others who genuinely want to encourage you and would take pride in them becoming your boss. And I think we've just had too many who've sat in that chair for too long and not had the forethought to think, actually, these people have got more about them. You go for it. You make some mistakes. You know, yeah. And I think I don't think of individual people because I don't want to be horrible to some of the chief execs, but they are very arrogant in their belief that they are the only people who've got the answers to any problem.
I mean, it's more about how we enable young talent, because in my age, which is back in the 1700s, I mean, quite a lot of people did set up business in their 20s, and no one actually thought a thing of it. Now we have a young entrepreneur on the line who's doing it at the age of 24. Suzanne, are you? Yep, giving anything away too much? She's still here. How old are you, Suzanne? Do I ask? Am I allowed to ask that? You're going to tell me.
Just turned 25 a week 25.
Ago. And you're seen as very young to set up a business, but actually 30 years ago that was allowed and people empowered it.
I was running my own pub at 19. You know, in my time, it was, everyone thought that I was the youngest licensee in the whole country. The amount of times that I heard that from people was ridiculous. They weren't, it was me. But there was like a huge pride in doing it really young and having a go. And you're quite right. I mean, somebody approached me for some marketing. He was launching an app a couple of weeks ago. And I looked at him and I thought, oh my God, you know, can you drive? And that is the way that we're sort of disciplined now to think. There is that massive gap. And I obviously slapped myself and said, I'm hugely respectful of what you do. How can I help? But, you know, we do need to break that stigma.
Well, I think we just got to be more encouraging. Mariana, you're big on this subject. Your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting what we've been mentioning. One of the mentees from one of the hospitality colleges that I started mentoring and coaching in February, she was one of those young talents with family background being in the hospitality. Her family are Lebanese, and they've had their own restaurant for over 40 years. She just graduated and completely was lost. She said, well, all I thought I will do is just, I'm going to continue and study diversity, and just digging deep through what are those studies going to get you? What is it that you really enjoy doing? Where do you really see yourself being in few years? I'm not even saying 10, 20, whatever. Nobody plans that nowadays. Just like, what is it that brings you joy these days? Why don't we focus on now, and what can you do since you can't get into the college or into the studies of diversity? And she, interestingly, she said, I just want to bake, and I just want to make people happy and eat what I bake. And she's 21 years old, and this is gonna make me cry, but she found an overnight baker job in the Hummingbird Bakery, where she decided she's gonna learn all the processes and how things are done on a company level, which I encouraged her to do, because I told her that's what gave me my background. You know, you go through the motions in corporate world and learn from those that have done it many times around, and see what you can pick up from it. And she started her own baking business. She only promotes on Instagram, but she's pretty much baking for baby showers, and she did a couple of small weddings, and she's picturing some things that she has like a handful of clients, and she's 21 years old. So I think the great part about the young talent is that they are fearless, and they don't have to live under such pressure. I don't know, I did when I was younger, to be somewhere in certain amount of years. They actually have to just reach within themselves and ask themselves, when are you going to do it? If not now, what is it that you can do right now? And if they are encouraged the right way, they'll just go for it. So she's still in hospitality, despite of, being a bit worried about whether she's ever going to find a job. She runs her own business, and she still works overnight baking job in a Hummingbird Bakery. And it's just, she inspired me. She tells me I inspired her because I kicked her, towards doing something when she was all depressed in April. But now she's inspiring me. She's just so happy. I think she's just a perfect example of moving towards where her heart was, what she believed in, and what she was good at.
I think, Chris, sometimes, if I can just say, that youngsters just need encouragement, and going down the road of saying everybody should go to university is so wrong. Yes. I can honestly say, being a past lecturer, that I know probably 45% of those kids shouldn't have even been at university. And I think I've got a young kid called Paddy who worked for me when I was running a local rugby club, started in pot wash, started in collecting glasses. Now he runs the whole club, and he's 21. And I think because if you invest in these youngsters, they then get a confidence. And one of the best things I've ever done at lecturing at an international colleges is seeing young kids come in from all nationalities, never even laid a table, carried a plate. And I used to take them to that rugby club and make them do an event within 5 weeks of being in the UK. They were from Russia, Asia, all around the world. And these kids, I had to literally pull them off the roof of the minibus when I drove them back to the college, because they couldn't believe how proud they were in themselves. And I told them to send their family photographs of them in their black and white that they had to buy themselves. So it's so rewarding to see young children being encouraged and to actually achieve something.
I agree. Look, I'm going to give a quick plug. Annie coming, and I think Marianne's coming on the 17th, which is on Thursday. We're actually doing a session on hospitality education. Is it time for a rethink with Chimi? So please, if you're around, please feel free to come and get involved in that debate, because our view is exactly this: young people need, and actually we need to actually sell hospitality training. So Suzanne, bringing you back in.
Yep.
I've lost you. There you are. You're obviously. I just want to say thank you, because I'm just very conscious of time. It's been I think this could go on for another hour with ease. So look, it's been a delight to catch up with you. So thank you for your time today. And actually, I'm sure we'll pull you back in to have more of these conversations if you're open to it as we go. But can we all say thank you to Suzanne, please?
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne.
And thank you for joining us. Look, it's a great debate, and actually it's one we want to carry on. So please come and get involved. And I look forward to seeing you all soon. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Bye.
See you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.